Good morning, it's Summer, and welcome back to the Concellation 2021 Green Room. If you're into excitement on page or screen, there's no need to dance around our next guests. Please welcome Teel James Glen and Caroly Gyzander.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Hey Charles, thanks Danny. Glad to be here.
So how's the apocalypse been treating you guys?
I'm actually doing okay. I was mostly a hermit beforehand, so I go out foraging, about the same amount of time as I did previously, and bring back whatever I can club.
Mm-hmm. I'm doing well. My cat, on the other hand, has gotten so traumatized by the fact that I am always home that she gets terribly upset when I'm not at home. So we will likely see her in a little while. But.
So one of the places I know you guys from is the New York Review of Science Fiction readings, and we're hopefully getting back to that. And so, Carol, I know you were also doing readings at Otto's and KGB and things like that. You want to talk a little bit about what it's like to do that, because hopefully we're coming back soon.
Yeah, both Teel and I are members of HWA, the Horror Writers Association, the New York chapter. And that's actually how I got into it. I met Teel at a con and went to listen to him at a reading at Lovecraft Bar, which is now a defunct operation. And it was so much fun hanging out with the horror writers that I started doing more and more and actually writing more horror. So HWA New York chapter has done readings at Otto's Shrunken Head. We do a yearly thing with Women in Horror Month at KGB Bar, which is the literary, wonderful location of everything. And it's very much fun. Now, we couldn't do those in person, so we started an online reading called Galactic Terrors, which comes up on the second Thursday of every month. But I'm really looking forward to doing readings again in person, and there's some coming up this summer. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's really nice to be in the same room with people. As delightful as this is, not having to, being able to go to your refrigerator and get a drink and just sit and watch. It's really kind of nice to be in the same space as other humans, or at least things passing as human.
And one of the reasons why is because you can see people's reaction. It makes a huge difference. I remember reading a news story that had not been published yet out loud at Lovecraft Bar, and everybody was like paying focused attention through the first, third of the story. And after a while, they all started like looking at their watch and checking their phone. It's like, oh, I need to fix the middle of this story. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. I love to hear writers read their own material, even if they're not good. And it's about a 50-50 thing. Some writers are terrible at reading their own stuff because they're worried about it. And others, you hear that inner voice come through. And even the ones who are a little shy about reading it, there's something about hearing it in an author's voice that gives it something extra. And anytime I read their work afterwards, I hear their voice. And I find that really, that's that extra secret sauce in stories that to me just gives them more. I really enjoy that. That's why I've been really lucky. I live in the New York area because there's so many readings between the science fiction writers, and the mystery writers, and the horror writers. The pandemic's been really good for a lot of people who live in places where there aren't a lot of writing groups because they can get online.
Yeah.
But and that's the trade-off. But the fact that I'm lucky enough to be in a place where I could go conceivably when things were rolling, there were like 3 nights a week where people were reading somewhere in a reachable area. That's amazing. It becomes a case of, do I want to sit home and write, or am I going to actually go listen to somebody else read? And, but I really am looking forward to having that dilemma again.
Well, when you were talking about writing, I know you racked up a very large number of sales in 2020.
I was really lucky. I did like 30 different sales in 2020. Some of them were, short fiction. I had some books. But I think partly is because I've been a freelancer for 40 something years. So if something's rejected, I send it out the same day. I find another market and I keep it going. if it's been turned down 5 or 6 times in a row, I might put it aside for a month or two and then look at it fresh and see if there's something that needs to be tweaked. But for the most part, I just keep them rolling because somewhere years ago, somebody told me is that there's always somebody who will like your work, and you only need that one somebody to be an editor for it to be bought. You know, and so if you keep sending it to enough people, one of them will be that editor. And that's proven true. I've sold stories that I had not been able to find a home for 7 or 8 years, that maybe had been rejected 10 times, 15 times. And then they found it, they loved it, they went out and got it, and it got a great response. So I just keep it going. That's it's hard though. It's really easy to be discouraged. That's why I always have the next one going out, so I'm not thinking about the one that just got rejected, you know?
Well, I have learned so much from you, Teel, over the past few years. The fact that you've always got something going out the door, you know, and it really has provoked me or prompted me to keep things rolling. And it takes me back to the phrase that they were using to publicize the lottery many decades ago. You got to be in it to win it. You know, and if your story is not going out, then how are people going to see it and decide if it's right for their publication?
Yeah, I mean, there's that line between, is it perfect or is it saleable? And you can always hold on it forever and tweak it until it's dead. But if you don't sell it, it kind of doesn't matter. You might as well have been standing in a corner reciting to yourself. So, I mean, I'm really lucky. Carol is like my beta reader, and I have a writing group I'm with. I put it through the hopper of the Carolator and the writing group. And so I've already gotten feedback before the thing goes out the first time. And I think it's actually increased my sales and certainly my quality, because I get that feedback. I used to be really gun shy about writers groups, and Carol helped get me over that because she's in a couple that have been really good for her. But it took me a while to find the group that was right for me. And when I did, boy, do I owe them a lot. I feel like they've helped me become a much better writer. Because there's the successful writer and there's the better writer. Sometimes they're the same, you know, and no matter how successful you are, you can always strive to be better. And I'm still working to be successful, but I am working constantly at it. For me, it's all about just continuing to do it. You know, there's write, repeat, write, sell, repeat, or one of those formulas. And that's it. You know, I just keep it going.
So I know for some people, what drives them is fascination with a genre or a particular type of character. Do you guys know what core idea maybe sits in a lot of your stories? What's kind of central to a lot of your writing?
Mine is, I go into multiple genres. I do science fiction, I do horror, I do suspense stuff, weird, dark things, some memoir pieces, you know, some fun stuff. Mine is all, I just want to, you know, grab you by the heart and kick you in the feels, you know. My stuff is very character driven because my book group I've been in the same book group for over 20 some odd years with the same bunch of women. And we read mostly literary fiction and memoir, believe it or not. And here I am, a speculative fiction writer. But I think that helps me focus on the character and what's inside the person. And that bleeds through no matter what genre I'm writing, suspense, mystery, anything. And Teel's in multiple genres as well. I'm curious to see what you're going to say, buddy.
I don't know. I'm not sure what I do. People tell me it's gender bending pulp stuff. I'm very concerned with brotherhood or sisterhood and honor in my stories, in people trying to do good, even in horrible circumstances. But because my stories always start with character, even if there's an interesting twist is like the main part of the story. Even my mysteries, it's always about who the character is. So I think I just want to connect. I just want people to find something in the story that draws them. I'm not quite sure. Like, I don't know what I do. I just sit down and the words come out until somebody stops me.
One of the things I love about your writing, Teel, and we are beta readers for each other, so we usually see each other's stuff first and then run it through our groups and all. But one of the things I love is that some of your work is fun and exciting, and it's a kick to read. But almost all of it has a real focus on somebody doing something true to themselves. They have an internal mythos or opinion or set of values, and that determines their actions through everything they do, which makes it very informative and uplifting to read. So no matter what genre you're in.
Yeah, I'm very conscious of that. I have two characters who are essentially religiously driven. My sword and fantasy series, Altiva, the main character is a priest of this religion on another world. And my pulp adventure series, Dr. Shadows, he was found found by these monks in a monastery in North Korea, and they brought him back to life and all of this. And he's dedicated himself to doing good for the sake of doing good. And I tend to find, I tend to follow characters who are following some inner call. Even my version of Bob Howard in Cowboy in Carpathia, which is the novel that came out last year. His calling is to do what's right, and devil be damned if you get in the way. I will do what's right, and that's a very pioneer thing too. It kind of comes through in some of his writing, and so yeah, I think that's sort of the base thing is people following some inner call that is for a correct purpose. That's why I don't tend to write from the villain's point of view very often. Although villains all think that they're doing the right thing anyway, because otherwise nobody thinks they're a villain. They always think they're the hero in their own story.
And a Cowboy in Carpathia that you just mentioned is the one that won the award, right? Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, all right. Here's the cover.
Yeah.
Cowboy in Carpathia. It won the 2021 Pulp Arc Award, Pulp Award from Pulp Factory for Best Novel. Which was a wonderful surprise. I never figured I'd win anything from anything, and the reviews of it have humbled me and actually made me think, dang, I have to really buckle down and do good stuff now. I can't just write for fun. I have to write good stuff. It becomes a dilemma. It's like, darn, I wrote something that actually touched people. Now I got to do it again. But I'm still writing the same stuff. It's just now I'm burdened with terrible purpose. Me and Logan.
And let loose upon the world. Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, I actually enjoy writing the villain's viewpoint, because for me, one of the thrills in writing is trying to figure out how to get into the head of somebody who thinks really differently than I do. Are there characters you guys have developed that have really actually made you think differently in the real world, that have carried out of the writing back into other choices?
Like I said, I tend not to write from the point of view of the villain, but I always understand the point of view of the villain. And like I said, to the villain, their point of view is valid. They are the hero in their own story. So I try not to make even the villains cardboard. I try to make them have a valid point of view that if you were in their shoes, you might think the same way, but they're not the people I'm focusing on. But yeah, I really do try to think, particularly like saying the fantasy stuff, the Altiva stories. I have to look at people born in this world. How would they think? I can't impose my, Brooklyn white old guy New York point of view. They have to think differently about everything from food to religion. And so, I mean, I had to design the religions of the world and then think, you know, in any given religion, how would people be eager to it? How would they be hypocrites about it? Because there's going to be. And, you know, but yeah, I do. I've written some from the point of view of the villain. I mean, Dracula's the bad guy in Cowboy in Carpathia. And as far as he's concerned, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. And, you know, and you guys are just in the way, you food sources. So, you know, because after all, vampires are nothing but giant mosquitoes. And yes, I killed the cat. Now, Carol.
Yes, I've been mad at him ever since then. But when you read the story, you'll understand why he did that. So, yes. And as far as my stories, I have one that I wrote recently. It's in the anthology called The Devil's Due. And it's basically Faustian tales. It's a guy who is taking care of his crippled wife who has a flesh-eating disease, and he decides to help her end her life, which she had asked him to do, but he's doing it for his own reasons, not because she asked him to. And so I took a good look at that, and it was a way for me to reflect on what I had to go through with both of my parents through Alzheimer's and making the decision for the end of my dad's life. And so it didn't come back and affect me afterwards so much as me exploring something from my own life. And that was a very interesting. It got great reactions. I was scared for people to see it after I wrote it, to tell you the truth. And poor Teel knows this. He talked me through a bunch of times. No, you have to put it out there. No, you have to show people, you know.
And it's because it is so raw and real. And she said, you know, I hit you in the feels with her stuff, and she does. I marvel. I think of my stuff as generally lighter. Carol is able to confront a lot of things and address things without putting a rose-colored glass on them. And that story particularly, again, the main character that she's concerned about, from his point of view, he did the right thing. But when you step back at it, it's easy enough to judge. But if you were wearing his shoes, you know, and she addresses that, you might think that way. So I thought she did a really good job, which is why I kept saying, no, it's okay. Put it out there. Put it out there.
Thank you for that.
And the importance of having somebody you trust read your stuff, because if there's 1,000 positive voices and your tiny little negative voice goes, no, you're going to listen to that voice. And so you need somebody on the other shoulder who's got as good a voice that you respect to, you know, I can't say enough how much having, I mean, I wrote for myself for a long time, and I've had friends who've commented, but having knowledgeable friends like my writing group and Carol have made a big difference in helping me move forward with the quality of the work anyway.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of the help that I've gotten from certain select readers from writing groups. It's tremendous. I've had the opportunity to read small pieces in public here and there, and the information I get back from that is amazing. I read this one piece to a group at Otakon, and it was just very, very brief because the whole point was to get the people from the audience to read. And they looked at me, and it was like half the group was, wow, this is exactly why I'm intrigued. And the other half of the group was floating heads in space. You didn't give us any description. You didn't give us any build. And literally the room was half and half. Half the people felt that I had written exactly what I should have written, and half the people told me why I did everything wrong. There was no middle ground.
Yeah.
Either great or terrible, but I got like 50 opinions, 25 and 25 out of the room.
Well, it's funny, but I remember somewhere someone said that, you know, if you ask 50 people an opinion of work, you may get 50 completely different opinions. Then you have to sit back and go, whose are the opinions I respect and whose are the opinions that have no agenda? That's when you look at it and say, okay, realistically, I guess I should have included the description of that chair. or that person, oh, maybe I didn't, I saw it in my head, but they didn't. I mean, I teach writing to younger kids,
Mhm.
and the biggest thing is getting them to realize that I don't see the full picture if they don't tell me. All I get's what's on the page, and which sometimes is really good because, like you say, sometimes that's all you need is that floating head in space. That's all I want you to know because I want you to think about what they're saying. And others are like, I need to see their feet, and and it's finding that. And again, the only opinion that matters is the editor, the one who's signing the check.
And the other thing for feedback, it also depends on what they read. Are they your typical reader? I'm in one critique group where we have multiple genres are presented, and we sort of ask the people giving their feedback to indicate, I'm not a science fiction writer, but this is what but this is what I think. Because, if they don't read science fiction, they're not going to understand a warp drive or beam me up Scotty, but if they do read your particular genre and they're still not getting it, then that's a different kind of feedback, which I think is very useful.
Yeah, I say my one of my side trips on the path to where I am now is that I was in a writers group that all of them were really good writers, but they didn't write or read any of the stuff that I wrote or read. Mm-hmm. And so the tendency was to not necessarily try to make me write what they were reading, but they really could not understand, because it's not even the tropes. When you're writing in certain things, certain phrasings, certain feelings, certain character arcs are part of that genre. And those were the things they didn't like because they didn't read them. They went somewhere else. And so their opinions were valid, but not useful to me. And so, I ended up not staying with that group. The other danger is to finding a group that only is a bubble, that only echoes what you do. Yep. One of the nice things about the group that I'm in is there's 5 of us in the group, and the other 4, they write so completely different from me that I marvel at listening to them and marvel at what they do. And same thing, Carol writes very different from me. And it makes me grow as a writer to see what they do, but at the same time, they understand what I do. And that is the big difference, is that they don't try to make me what they, trope me to what they do. And at the same time, they can understand what I'm doing and say, well, yes, but, and they help, and there's no agenda other than let's all get better. Rising tide raises us all.
Floats all boats, yeah. And Charles, when we read at the New York Review of Science Fiction, Jim Freund's event, that was pretty much a sci-fi fantasy crowd. I just happen to have this here. This is the book we were reading from. It's Across the Universe, Tales of Alternative Beetles. And, you read your story, I read mine. We read a bunch of things, but it was well received because it was the right kind of crowd. It was great. It's very much fun.
When I was thinking of New York Review of Science Fiction, actually, I was thinking of the Sherlock Holmes reading and listening to Teel go through A Million Voices and watching you're reading with Elizabeth Crown.
Yeah, Elizabeth Crown, yeah.
Yeah, and she's kind of stopping at some points and looking over and going, wow, I'm kind of the audience.
I have a background as an actor. I've been an actor for 40 years, and my natural accent is this. I come from Flatbush, and my mother and father talk like this, and so I learned to speak newscaster as a young man. So from that point on, it was not a problem for me to take on an accent to hear. And so I tend, I will admit that when I'm reading my stuff, I try to find sections that have stuff that will make me sound better with accents and what have you. Because I hear them in my head anyway when I'm writing, but now the audience gets to hear it. You know, my Dracula is very Bela Lugosi. But I thought Carol was saying about the right audience for the work. When I'm reading for a mystery group, I pick different parts of my stuff. When I read for a horror group, I pick because I read one thing once, and afterwards, Carol was like, "That was a little bloody for this group." You got a hard reaction from that. I went, "Yeah, I guess maybe I shouldn't have read that section."
There was a lot of, oh.
Yeah. So yeah, you might not necessarily read the beheading scene for the women's sewing group, but that, but that is part of it too. Is connecting with your audience and understanding the audience.
Yeah. When you talk about Carol being in the audience, my older daughter has sat in on some of the technical lectures I've done, things like that, specifically to watch everyone else's reaction. And she'll come back with 7 pages of notes. You know, you tried this joke, it didn't work, and then you referenced it later and it really, really didn't work. You said this other thing and everyone was nodding when you were halfway through the sentence. They're like, yeah, this is my experience. You're exactly saying, you know, we're completely in line with you. And it's interesting how much that you do or don't get while you're presenting versus what somebody sitting and watching the audience gets.
The Marx Brothers, Thalberg made them they took their scripts for their movies that they did for Thalberg on the road, and they did live shows, and they had the script writers standing backstage, and they would note what jokes went flat and what jokes worked. And that's one of the reasons why those group of movies are so funny. They had already tested them with live audiences. And
that's fantastic. I didn't know that.
Oh, it's one of those things where you go, yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, because comedy is subjective. I mean, good comedians know when to pause for the laughter, you know, in their work. They know they built the timing in, which is why a lot of talk show hosts went nuts when things went virtual. They started having their family members sit in the room with them, so they had a live audience. You know.
Right. Otherwise, there's no laugh track. There's no response. It's like talking to the wall.
Yeah. And so I think that's part of it. Is like you said, that's awesome to have somebody come back to you to be able to say, Dad, that callback didn't work. Don't put that joke in again. That's brilliant. But again, having friends who go to readings with you who afterwards can say they really didn't like that part really does help.
Yeah. Dissect what you've heard, how they presented it, how people reacted, how you would have done it that way or done it differently. It's a great way to learn. It's the same as when I've edited a series of anthologies for a charity press called Writer Punk Press. And I had a bunch of volunteer editors who would edit the story first, send it to me. I would review the edits, send it to the author, look at what came back from the author, had them review it. So I learned so much from the 4 anthologies I've done with them so far, with professional editors looking at people's work. You know, so investigating and seeing different reactions and different input from folks is really, really helpful. And I learned a lot, and I really think it helped jumpstart my writing career, because I wound up doing that when I was fairly new at this. So that was very fun.
Seeing how things break can be very useful.
Yes. And in my one of my writing groups, one of my critique groups, people see the work cold, and one person will read the other author's work out loud, having never seen it before. And typically one of our members will keep track and pay attention to where the reader stumbles in a sentence. You know, we all know it's great to read your work out loud and hear how it sounds, but hearing somebody else read it and have them not be able to parse the sentence or put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, you know, that's important and really useful.
It makes it. So, I'm sorry, Teel, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that it's one of the advantages writers get when you get a chance to read your stuff out loud. Yeah, to have somebody in the audience who could tell you that they didn't get that is just priceless. It really is. I read my stuff aloud to myself at home, and I read it to the group. but it's still having strangers hear it for the first time. It's a really great way to kind of amp up the quality level of it before it goes out even.
Mhm.
So let me ask you guys this. We're hopefully coming back to live conventions and things like that. If each of you could design an event for you to host or participate in, what would your ideal event be for that first or second live event you get to do again?
You mean the whole event or a particular presentation? What do you
However
think?
you want to take it.
I think it would be fun to have several authors get together, read a piece of their work, and chat among themselves about it afterward. Do sort of like a little mini critique group between some authors who care about each other's feedback. I think that would be interesting. So many times it's just a panel and you ask each person on the panel the same damn question and it gets a little tedious. But I think doing something like that would be pretty interesting.
I would take that a step further. I think it would be kind of cool to do a challenge reading where everyone would get a prompt and they would get a couple of weeks to write say a 2,000 or 3,000 word story off the same prompt, and have 5 different authors in any genre they want take that prompt and do a 3,000 word version of it, story, and have them all read it and then talk about why they went where they went.
Yes.
I think that would be, it's like, when you have like across the universe, the Beatles. I just thought the fact that there were so many directions that book went.
Mhm.
I think the idea of a live event where you did that would also be really awesome to have, and then have them say, well, the reason I did this was because I was inspired by that, and talk about it. Because again, process matters. And I love behind the scenes stuff.
Yep.
Sometimes it's as simple as, I needed to pay for a new car. But more often than not, it's I was dealing with the trauma of this, or I was inspired because I saw this video of, or my daughter said this to me. And I think I would be really kind of cool to have that kind of, I don't know what you'd call it really, because it would be a reading, but it would also be a critique group, but it would also be
It's kind of writers improv, and you can
Yeah,
sign me up.
it's-
I would love to do writers improv with you guys. That'd
Yeah.
be
Okay,
thrilled.
and there's a really cool thing. I got to do this at PhilCon. It was so much fun. It was a Baron von Munchausen kind of thing. And there were 3 of us authors, Tom Doyle and a couple other folks. And we were given a little prompt and had to start just storytelling and telling a story. But the MC person could interrupt us, or the other panelists, with a question. Oh, so you went and investigated that, but did you account for the fact that the buffalo herd was running through? And then you had to like pivot your story instantly. It was so much fun. It was like terrifying and nerve-wracking, but it was so much fun. So yeah, live improv like that, Charles, we got to do it.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Absolutely.
Yes,
There's
yes.
actually a card game that does that called Once Upon a Time, where
Yeah.
you're allowed to interrupt anybody else's story as long as you are playing the card in a way that adds to the story materially. You can't just say the princess and put down the princess, met a frog and put down. You have to actually incorporate it and incorporate everything everybody else at the table has done. So yeah, that stuff is huge fun.
Well, I mean, I've done 60 Renaissance festivals, and that's pretty much the warm up improv work for Ren actors is, I mean, one of the things I always tell I teach stage combat too. I tell my acting students is that if you work a Renaissance fair for even only one season, after that, nothing that ever happens on a set or on a stage will disrupt you. A helicopter could crash in the middle of a love scene, and you would not only incorporate it, but it would make sense suddenly. And as opposed to actors, I've seen actors who, if something goes wrong, they can't deviate. They don't know,
Yeah.
And most Rennies, and they'll take it in stride. And then the great bird came from the sky, and while it smoked and smothered, my heart burnt for you too. And it just goes right. You incorporate it and keep on going.
And you know what that is? It's like, push it. I mean, great, yeah.
Exactly. Bullfinch mythology. No, but that's exactly, I mean, that to me is how Shakespeare, chances are most of the good comebacks in Shakespeare, since it was all written down like 30 and 50 years afterwards, were what the individual actors came up with and then they kept because it worked. Chances are he only wrote about half of that. And then he got a bunch of actors who knew how to improv.
And he got all the credit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
really.
Improv are us. That'll be it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
Definitely in.
I love, because writers, good Lord, writers have so many people in their heads. They're just, and some writers are able to externalize that. Some can't. And I completely sympathize with with writers who are not able to get outside. They do it all on the page. But others, they can live the characters, as much outside as in. And that, that this kind of thing would be perfect for them. Good Lord.
Absolutely. So final 2 minutes, guys, pitch projects, talk about stuff coming out soon, things that you really love, you'd like to see more attention for. Go for it.
Well, I've got, this just came out.
Yeah,
Well, they're right in front of your face. Yeah.
yeah, the background is screwing you up. You'll have to tell us.
It's the Chronicles of the Skull Mask, which is a 6 stories where a cursed item shows up when people need just vengeance. Just came out from Bold Venture Press. And it's, again, a lot of it's getting in the head of the bad guy, but the bad guy is the good guy because just vengeance is what they get. And the other book that's out is John Shadow's Killing Shadows. It's a thriller book from Airship 27. So, Carol.
And that one's a great story. I haven't even read Skull Mask yet. I can't wait till I can get it. Yeah. I have 2 things coming up. This is Taught by Time. Myth Goes Punk. This is from Writer Punk Press, where we take myth, folklore, and legend, and we do a steampunk or a cyberpunk, biopunk spin on it. It's a series of short stories that benefit a no-kill animal shelter out on the West Coast. That's going to come out this summer. And the other thing I have is really exciting. I'm muffling my voice with this. This is Under Twin Suns, an anthology edited by Jim Chambers. It's coming out from Hippocampus Press at the end of June. And this is a bunch of stories that continue the world of The King in Yellow that was written by Robert Chambers back at the end of the 1800s. And he was a precursor and influence on Lovecraft. It's a set of really cool, weird stories. And I can't wait to get my hands on it because that cover is just like, ah. So that's releasing at the end of June.
Very cool. Thank you guys for being with us. And Danny, Danny.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks for joining us.